This is the new Galleon, and it might be the most iconic ship we've all been waiting for since the release of Skull and Bones. It's the first true DPS-focused large ship in the game, and it can deliver the highest damage output if you play it correctly. But is it actually better than the other large ships, and what's the optimal way to use it? In this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about the Galleon. By the end, you'll understand how to survive fights in both PvP and PvE, and how to approach your first build. We'll break down its perks, its offensive capabilities, its defensive strengths, and how to use its movement to control fights. And make sure you stay until the end, because otherwise, you'll miss one of the major weaknesses of this ship. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to use the Galleon properly. Let's get into it. Alright, let's start with the perks, because this is where the Galleon really defines its strategy and the kind of weapons you want to use. This ship is built to do one thing: deal high damage. It plays an aggressive role while still having just enough defensive capability to survive. So let me show you why each perk exists and what role it plays in making this ship work the way it should. Let's talk about the first perk of the Galleon, Iron Thunder. This ship gets a second row on the lower gun deck, which makes all deck weapons extremely important. Iron Thunder increases your weapon damage by 10% against targets within 350 meters, which is already very strong. When your non-auxiliary weapons are not reloading, Iron Thunder begins charging over 1.5 seconds. Once fully charged, it increases your damage by 65%. Iron Thunder then ends 3 seconds after dealing damage with it. This gives the ship incredibly high burst damage and makes the perk extremely powerful. It's also important to understand that every damage tick on your opponent matters here. For example, if your opponent is burning, that burn damage still counts as damage dealt by you, which means Iron Thunder will not charge during that time. And lastly, while Iron Thunder is active, allied smaller ships within 500 meters also gain 10% more damage for 30 seconds, giving the Galleon strong team support potential as well. Now let's move on to the second perk, Red Wake. While Iron Thunder is active, you deal 35% more damage against targets within 250 meters. In addition, fully charging Iron Thunder or destroying a target grants Red Wake, increasing your top speed by 50% for 15 seconds. These perks are extremely strong. A potential 110% damage increase is absolutely insane, and the speed boost allows you to immediately chase down your next target after securing a kill. This creates massive momentum and helps you maintain constant pressure. Together, these perks clearly push the Galleon toward an aggressive close-range playstyle that rewards staying on top of your target. However, sometimes it's actually better to wait for a guaranteed hit before firing. If you fire a full broadside and only one cannonball hits the enemy sails, those 3 seconds immediately start ticking down, and your massive burst window is already being wasted before your main impact hit even lands. So that's something very important to keep in mind when playing the Galleon. It's actually the opposite of the Corvette. On the Corvette, it's usually worth firing, even if not every shot lands, because you still apply flag bearer stacks to the target. But on the Galleon, those 3 seconds matter a lot, so timing your volleys correctly becomes extremely important. And now let's dive into the offense of the ship. But before we do that, if you like my style of video, consider subscribing. It would help the channel grow. Anyway, back to the offense of the ship. On the broadside alone, this ship brings 17 gun ports per side, split into 6 on the top deck, 5 on the middle deck, and 6 on the lower deck. That is already a massive amount of firepower. Up front, you get 4 gun ports, 2 on the top deck and 2 on the lower deck. This means the front of your ship can make use of both all-deck and top-deck weapons. At the rear, there are another 2 top-deck gun ports, and on top of that, the Galleon also comes with 2 auxiliary slots. In total, that gives us 40 gun ports. That is an insane amount of offensive power for a single ship. When it comes to weapon choices for your all-deck slots, there are 2 main options, Culverins or Demi-Cannons. Both are viable, but they play very differently. Once you are within 350 meters, you can take full advantage of the damage increase from Iron Thunder, and once you are within 250 meters, you can benefit from both of your perks. Culverins have more range and can feel more consistent, since you do not always want to stay extremely close to your target. However, Demi-Cannons bring another advantage. Their shorter range naturally forces you into close combat, which fits your perks perfectly. For your auxiliary slot, you can honestly use whatever fits your playstyle best. The Warhammer rockets perform extremely well at close range, and it only takes around 2 seconds to fire the full volley of 10 rockets. Mortars, however, let you fire both auxiliary shots much faster overall, and they combine extremely well with your opening attack. For example, you can start a fight with a double mortar hit and immediately follow up with a broadside for heavy burst damage. So, overall, multiple setups are viable. The Galleon is best played as an aggressive, offensive ship with strong chasing potential. It rewards players who stay close, keep applying pressure, and constantly move from one fight to the next. Now let's take a closer look at the defensive capabilities of the Galleon. Fully upgraded, the ship has 116,000 hull health and a brace strength of 23,000. That already puts it in a very solid spot in terms of raw survivability. It has more HP and brace strength than the Corvette. On top of that, the Galleon has good natural resistances, 20% explosive resistance, 10% flooding resistance, 15% piercing resistance, 10% electric resistance. Right now, it's still a bit early to say what the exact meta will be this season, but I still expect flooding, poison, and piercing weapons to be very strong. Because of that, having built-in flooding and piercing resistance is already solid. Now let's talk about the weak points of the ship. It's extremely important that you always know where the weak points are on the ship you're using. Good players will aim for them constantly, especially with piercing weapons. On the Galleon, we have 2 weak points on the front, 2 big weak points on each side. So just like the other large ships, the Galleon has many large weak points. That's bad news against piercing weapons because they can deal bonus damage if they hit those spots. The special thing about the Galleon's weak points is that its side weak points are higher above the waterline than on the other large ships. This means you have better protection against torpedoes. At the same time, it's easier to get hit by all other weapons. For your armor choice, something like the Leviathan armor could be very strong for PvP, especially to help protect those large weak points. In PvE, you can use whatever you like. I would recommend using Nocturne Heart or Buccaneer's Oath just to get the extra damage, since NPCs can't hit your weak points. Fully upgraded, the Galleon reaches 15 knots base speed, and up to 20 knots while Red Wake is active. That is extremely fast, and very important when you are chasing opponents. The turning speed is also very good, making the Galleon feel far more responsive during active combat. As you can see, you can extremely quickly switch from one broadside to the other, allowing you to bring a massive amount of firepower on target. But there is an important weakness. Like the frigate and the Corvette, the Galleon has a dead angle at the rear. If enemies stay directly behind you, your damage output drops dramatically, and you are forced into a defensive position. The optimal fighting direction is forward and broadside. That is where your weapons and maneuverability give you maximum pressure. An important thing to note here, take a closer look at the firing quadrants. The Galleon can almost shoot directly in front of the ship, similar to the frigate. But if you're using a Corvette, you need to angle your ship much more sideways to bring your broadside weapons forward. That means the frigate and the Galleon are actually better ships for chasing opponents, at least when looking purely at firing angles and weapon quadrants. Now let's talk about the reason why the Galleon can sometimes feel weak, and it all comes down to weak points. The Galleon receives an additional 30% weak point damage. On top of that, it has less hull health and less brace strength than a frigate. In PvE, weak points matter less because NPCs cannot consistently hit them. But other players absolutely will, and experienced PvP players will aim for those spots constantly. If you do not protect your weak points properly, you will sink fast. Because of the additional weak point damage, the Galleon gets punished harder than most ships. Managing weak point exposure is difficult because the ship has several large weak points on almost every side of the hull. That is why defensive armor and defensive furniture are so important, and never let enemies sit comfortably behind you. That is your dead angle, and you're going to lose a lot of DPS there. When played correctly, the Galleon feels extremely strong, aggressive, and powerful. When played carelessly, it can melt extremely fast. So that is the Galleon, a ship built to deal damage, support your team, and survive the toughest fights. Remember, protect your weak points, control your angles, keep trimming sails, and keep moving. When you do that, this ship becomes extremely powerful. Whether you are fighting in PvP or clearing PvE content, the Galleon rewards skill, strategy, and precision. This is your Galleon. If you have any questions about the Galleon, let me know in the comments below. Use it well.